Hey y'all, this episode involves discussions about murder, child abuse, child murder, and suicide, and includes foul language that some listeners may find offensive and may not be suitable for young listeners. Listener discretion is always advised.
Hey y'all.
Hello you all.
She's Christina.
She's Mary.
And this is
True Crime Down Yonder.
Hey y'all. All of our wonderful listeners.
Welcome back.
All 45 of you. Hello. We love you.
I think it's like up into, well, I don't know. It's hard to know how many we have. We know how many, we can look at how many downloads we have. We probably have about 50.
Yeah. I know that we've covered over 100 this week. So.
Have we?
Yeah.
Good.
We're making progress little by little.
We're getting there slowly.
Yeah.
And as always, we are so grateful to all of our listeners.
Absolutely.
And everybody who likes and shares us. Anyway, moving on. What's up?
I wanted to speak about my story last week. It's been brought to my attention that I used a wrong term while talking about someone.
Okay.
Apparently, it is not socially acceptable to name a sex worker a prostitute. I always grew up thinking that that's what they were. Tomato. But I want to apologize to anybody I might have offended.
Correct.
It's not politically correct.
Okay.
From now on, I will refer to them
say
sex worker.
Okay.
Because I don't want to step on anybody's toes. And yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. So just bear with me. I'm just a country bumpkin. So.
But I mean, there are synonyms. I mean, okay.
I mean, would y'all rather me been like she was a hoe?
No, we're definitely not going to do that. If anything is politically incorrect, it would be that. But okay. All right, cool. I'm covering this one. This case, if you have baby mama, baby daddy drama in your life, if there is somebody that you used to be somewhat fond of, at least enough to have children with, and now that you're not too fond of them and they're making your life a living hell, this case is for you. This might make you feel a little bit better. I don't know. It might make you feel worse, but
I know that you've dealt with that before.
Oh yeah.
On your side,
I think anybody that's been divorced or anything like that has gone through that. So I mean, but this case takes the cake. And trigger warning, which I know we did the disclaimer, but this involves some rough stuff, and it involves child murder. So if that's something you can't deal with, if that's not your jam, then maybe you need to listen to next week's episode. Or,
is it ever really anybody's jam?
I mean, it's not anybody's jam, but some people just
they just can't take it.
They just can't handle that. So, yeah, just giving you a warning on that. But, yeah, so we're just going to dive in. This case takes place in several different states, North Carolina, Kentucky, and some of it in New Mexico.
Okay.
But most of it takes place in North Carolina. That's where the main people in this are from.
Carolina.
Today I'm covering what has been referred to as the bitter blood murders. And I used several sources for this, but my main source came from a book I read entitled Bitter Blood by Jerry Bledsoe. And that may be why these are referred to as the bitter blood murders. I don't know. But it's also the case of Susie Newsome-Lynch and Fritz Klenner.
Fritz Klenner?
Fritz. Putting on the Fritz.
So, did you enjoy the book, though? Was it very factual?
It was very informative. It gets really in-depth into, like, all the biographies of everybody involved.
I love a good book
So, I mean,
like that.
It was a lot. It gave us a lot of information. So, I think, if anything, I just had trouble condensing it.
Right.
But I did my best. So, let's move on. So, Susie Sharp Newsome was born on December 24th, 1946. She was born to her parents, Robert Newsome II and Florence Sharp Newsome. She was born into the prestigious Newsom and Sharp families. They both were very prominent in the community as well as wealthy.
Must be nice.
Yeah, I know. Susie's father, Bob, was an industrial engineer, and her mother was a high school teacher. Susie was named after her beloved aunt, Susie Marshall Sharp. Susie Sharp was the first woman to be appointed to the state Supreme Court in North Carolina.
Ooh, go women.
Yeah, so the whole family were a bunch of overachievers. Susie's grandparents instilled the need for higher education in all of their kids. Mm-hmm. And even though at that time women weren't really expected to do anything other than get married and have children, all of their children, I think there were like 10 of them, and
jeez.
If I recall correctly, I think a couple of their kids had died in childhood. The ones that survived to adulthood, all of them went to college.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money to be spent on all those kids going to college.
Well, I mean, they had it.
Well, yeah,
her grandparents were self-made, and later in life, they were very wealthy themselves, and they made that a priority to put all their kids through college, which they did. And Susie's mother, Florence, was referred to as the dumb one.
What?
Amongst her siblings.
That's got to be the worst family name, or to be
well,
known
I don't
as
think the family called her that.
But
it was
she
just,
was probably the one that was the less brighter one.
Yeah, it was just. I think that came from people who knew the family, and even though she was a smart woman, she was a college graduate herself, and she went on to become a teacher. She was just less academic. Her grades were not as good as the other siblings, and her aspirations were not as high.
Yeah.
But to be a college graduate and a teacher, and you're referred to as the dumb one, that lets you
know. That makes me feel terrible.
Yeah, that lets you know, how educated this family was. But anyway, when Susie was born, she was delivered by her uncle, Dr. Fred Klenner. Dr. Klenner was married to Susie's aunt, Annie Hill Sharp. Yeah, I said that really slow, I know.
Annie Hill Sharp.
Hill Sharp.
Annie Hill Sharp.
Yeah, I was trying to read it in the notes.
Annie Hill Sharp. Okay.
Anyway.
Sorry.
Annie Hill Sharp, and if you haven't been able to tell already, this family likes to use surnames as middle names.
Really?
Yeah, that's like a Southern thing. I mean, we don't really do it in our family, but a lot of Southern families do that.
We do. My name is like that.
Well, no, but you're not a surname. It's one thing to be named after a family member, like their first name or middle name, but when they use like someone's last name, it's like if a girl is born and of course she has her father's last name, they would make her middle name her mother's maiden name or something like that.
Oh, like their middle name's like a last name.
Yeah.
Okay, I
surname.
got you.
Yeah, so they're naming them after members of the family.
I feel dumb.
That was very common in this family, and that's why like Susie, her middle name was Sharp because her mother's maiden name was Sharp.
Yeah.
Dr. Klenner had married Susie's aunt, Annie Sharp. Yeah, Annie Hill Sharp, sorry.
Annie Hill Sharp.
These names are so long. Annie Hill Sharp. He was a little bit of a weirdo.
We like weirdos.
Yeah, I know, but he was like a special kind of weirdo.
Yeah.
Annie Hill was actually very accomplished herself. She was only the second woman to graduate from Duke University with a Bachelor of Science degree.
Damn.
In nursing.
Go, girl.
Yeah. So, and that's where she had met Dr. Klenner. And the family just never really took to Dr. Klenner. He was from up north. He was Catholic. He was like a white supremacist.
Oh, shit.
A Hitler admirer. And he had a pretty controversial guy. So they kind of kept their distance from him.
Sounds like it.
And from Annie after that.
Did they kind of feel like he was just kind of ignorant?
No, not ignorant. I mean, he was smart. He was a doctor.
True, but yeah. But
he was he was a racist.
I feel like racists. I feel like racists are ignorant. So I feel like he was ignorant.
They are. But I mean, he was a smart guy. But
ignorance is not based on your level of education. It's literally,
Well,
he was ignorant. We talked about ignorant.
Okay, so you mean that maybe he was uneducated in?
Oh, he was educated, but he was just
I mean, uneducated in, like, racial matters?
Yeah.
No, I think he just didn't care. I mean, I think he was just all white power all the way. I mean, it's not that he didn't know. He just didn't care.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I mean, but you have to look at what time, this was. This was, like, in the 50s, 60s, or, 40s at this point when Susie was born.
Yeah.
So, drama followed shortly after Susie's birth. While she was in the hospital, and they used to stay like a week in the hospital back then.
Really?
Yeah. So, in the hospital, there was a patient that was mentally unstable. It was a woman who had gone AWOL in the Army, and she was seen watching the babies through the nursery glass. Mm-hmm. And when the staff wasn't looking, she went in and kidnapped Susie.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they found her shortly after, and she was unharmed and everything. But this scared the shit out of her parents.
I would assume so.
Yeah. And Bob Newsom, stayed up, all night, every night, just making sure that, she was okay. Before they left the hospital, Dr. Klenner diagnosed Susie with a heart murmur and told her parents that they should not allow her to cry, at least for the first year, because it would cause an irregular heartbeat and possibly cause her heart to stop completely.
That's like asking a fish not to swim.
Yeah, I know. So her parents, they did everything they could just to keep this child from crying. Anyway, a few years later, Susie would later have a little brother, Robert Newsom III, who would later be called Rob. Susie was described as a daddy's girl.
I can relate.
She could do no wrong by her father. The relationship between her and her mother turned contentious, and it was probably because she couldn't do anything wrong by her father.
Yeah.
But Susie would also throw these huge temper tantrums because she was incredibly spoiled, and these would even become violent. And whenever her mother told her no, she would have one of these tantrums. And at first, Florence would lock her in her bedroom until she calmed down. But when this stopped working, Florence resorted to pouring cold water on her, to literally chill her out.
I don't think it works that way.
Yeah. It seems kind of cruel, but I'm thinking she was kind of at her wits' end. She probably was
at her, yeah, she was just like, what the fuck do I do?
Yeah, she was at her wits' end with her, but they say that Susie always resented her for that. She held it against her for the rest of her life. Oh, wow. But anyway, Susie was a pretty little girl. She was the Queen of May when she was in kindergarten, which I think is I don't know if it's a local pageant or something they did at the school, but I don't know. She was the shit at the time.
All right. Well, go girl. I guess go Susie.
Yeah, go Susie. So anyway, when she was growing up, she greatly enjoyed history and anthropology, and she also displayed a great interest in the British royal family. And some of her friends even said that she seemed to think of herself as a princess. Oh, Anyway, she grew up to be a beautiful brunette. She had big dark eyes. And in 1964, she graduated from Northwest High School and enrolled at Wake Forest College. She was described as being very conservative. They said that, so this is in the by this time it's mid-60s and the hippie movement starting to take shape. She was
rock and roll.
Yeah, she was not about that life at all. She was very conservative. She
was always very straight and narrow.
Yeah, she always wore her little cardigan sweaters, like they were in the 50s, which I
I
wear them now, but
she was what you call a preppy girl.
Yeah, I think at the time they would have called her a square.
Yeah, a square.
Yeah, a square. But she absolutely hated hippies, and she was actually pro-Vietnam War, which at the time on college campuses across the country, they were protesting that.
Yeah, because everybody was getting drafted.
Yeah, but she was all for it. While attending Wake Forest College her freshman year, she meets Tom Lynch. Tom was a basketball player. His family was living in Kentucky, but he had moved around a lot as a child. His father was an executive for General Electric, and he was a pre-med student.
Okay.
Susie really did not like the athletic type, but she was always drawn to doctors.
Yeah, I bet.
She seemed to really want to marry a doctor, and so Tom was pre-med, so I guess she thought that was where he was going. All their friends said that they did not see what Susie and Tom saw in each other. And it wasn't so much that, her friends disliked him or his friends disliked her. They just didn't see that how they had much in common.
They felt like Susie was kind of out of his league?
No, not so much. They just felt like they just didn't have enough in common. The relationship, the relationship wasn't sustainable. And so Susie was described as being kind of bubbly and outgoing, and she liked to talk a lot, but she also had this very type A personality, and she seemed to have to be in control of things. And meanwhile, Tom was more laid back. He was a little more quiet.
Yeah.
They just didn't see what they saw in each other.
Okay.
Nevertheless, the relationship progresses, and soon they're talking about marriage. Tom takes Susie home to Louisville, where his family lives, to meet his family. He takes her to meet his mother, Dolores, his father, Chuck, and his sister, Janie.
Okay.
So when he takes her back home to meet the family, he takes her like over a weekend. Mm-hmm. Things do not go well.
Why not? What happened?
Susie and Tom's mother, Dolores, did not like each other from the start.
Damn.
Yeah. And one of the reasons for this is Dolores was a lot like Susie in many ways, and she could be a very difficult woman.
Two women that both want to be in control usually don't get along.
Yeah, so she had the same kind of personality type. She was very type A, but she did have differences from Susie, but she was described as being obsessed with cleanliness and organization. She hated her husband, Chuck, with a passion.
Even though hated her husband?
Yeah, they remained married, but she absolutely hated him. And the reason she hated him was because she craved stability. She liked routines. She liked doing the same thing every day.
She was compulsive?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she hated Chuck because while he was trying to work his way up in General Electric, he had to move the family several times.
And she hated it?
And she hated that. She just wanted to put down roots somewhere. She absolutely hated the man with a passion, and pretty much they had a big house in Louisville, but she would live like upstairs and he would live like down in the basement.
So they were like legally married, but they weren't.
Yeah, she had accused him of having affairs or having an affair, and there was no evidence to back this up. But she would tell her friends that he was having an affair, and she would call the woman that he was supposedly having an affair with, and get this is like cringeworthy. She would call this woman Moist Pearl. I know.
Moist Pearl?
Moist Pearl. Yeah, she would refer to his hypothetical girlfriend as Moist Pearl. Yeah, that's the last time I'm going to say that. Because I know everybody hates hearing it. But, and Chuck didn't really seem to hate her. He felt guilty because he knew that the lifestyle that they had lived, him moving the family so much, even though he made the family a ton of money.
Yeah, he was supporting the family.
He was supporting the family. She constantly threw it in his face that he made her move so much, and
she sounds like a real buzzkill.
He kind of took responsibility. He claimed that she was a good woman. She thought he was having this affair. She even got a friend to investigate for her. And Chuck was going to like a country club. He was frequenting this country club, and she thought that he was meeting up with his girlfriend there. And so the friend went and investigated for Dolores, and she went to this country club, and she started talking to like the managers and the bartenders. And they pretty much said, Chuck would just come in and get a drink and just sit at the window and stare out at the golf course.
Like, that's what he would do.
Yeah, that's what he would do.
I mean, he was unwinding. He wanted to probably just chill
get away from her.
Yeah. She sounds like a crazy bitch.
Yeah, and she also resented that he smoked. And at one time, she was a heavy
Everybody
smoker.
Smoked back then, though.
Yeah, they did. But at one time, she had been a very heavy smoker. And she quit. And after that, she just detested the habit. And he was still smoking, and she couldn't stand it. She couldn't stand him smoking in the house, but he refused to stop. Mm-hmm. Anyway, a little background on her. Anyway, she did not like Susie, and Susie did not like her. Susie felt like she was overbearing and controlling, and Dolores felt that Susie was snobby and pretentious.
Oh, wow.
Because Susie was all about throwing her family name around.
Yeah, just using that as like a way to lean on that, or putting herself up higher because of who her family is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and Dolores did not appreciate that at all. She also met Tom's sister, Janie. Janie was described as being a very sweet person, but the book also said that she was a lot like her mother.
Oh, wow.
And her mother was very overbearing with her and seemed to have more of an attachment than she did to Tom. Pretty much insisted on running her life, and it was probably for this reason that Janie never got married and she never had children.
Is she younger than Tom?
I believe she's a little bit older than Tom.
Okay.
But not by much.
Okay.
But anyway...
She was the kind that probably stayed living with mom and dad?
Yeah, she did. Well, no, she had moved out because she was pretty much a career student.
Okay.
She had like collected degrees.
Okay.
And it's like she would go to school and get a degree, and then she would
go
to work, and then she'd kind of get tired of it and decide she wanted to go do something else. So she had several degrees, and she just kept going back to school, and never got married, never had children. And in the book, it said that she came close once, and that there was a man that she was dating, and she brought him home to meet her parents in Louisville. Mm-hmm. And Chuck, her father, took this guy aside and was like, hey, Janie's cool and everything, but she's a lot like her mom. And he proceeded to hand this guy a book called The Manipulated Man. So he was pretty much saying, run, dude. Run away. Right. So, yeah, that never came into fruition. Back to Susie and Dolores. So after this weekend, it was obvious to everybody they did not like each other, but this did not keep Tom and Susie from progressing with their relationship. Tom was a little bit younger than Susie, so by the time Susie had graduated with her undergrad degree, Tom was still in college. Mm-hmm. So Susie decided to stay at Wake Forest and go to grad school just so that she could be with Tom pretty much.
Okay.
But after about a year, she took a job at R.J. Reynolds as a research assistant while she was waiting for Tom to finish his final year of college. In 1969, Tom proposed to Susie. The couple had set a date to marry after Tom's graduation. Well, Tom and Susie got married on June 6, 1970. Dolores and the family came down for the wedding. Dolores accused Susie's family of not paying proper attention to the Lynches.
What?
And Susie claimed that Dolores embarrassed her by drinking too much at the rehearsal dinner.
Okay.
And then shit hits the fan on the actual wedding day when Susie throws a massive temper tantrum because Tom's sister Janie was supposed to be a bridesmaid in the wedding. And when she showed up, her dress was wrinkled. And Susie lost her shit.
This sounds like two fucking families that are just... drama queens. Like, they're all drama queens.
Yeah, so...
I feel bad for Tom.
Spending Thanksgiving with these people.
I feel bad for Tom.
Oh, no, you're going to feel really bad for Tom.
You're
going to feel really, really, really bad for Tom. Poor Tom. She throws this fit over Janie's dress, and Dolores is like, well, we don't have enough time to have it pressed. And Susie's like, well, she's just not going to be at my wedding. And if I was Janie, I would have just taken that dress off, and I would just calmly be like, you know what, girl, it's fine.
I would have gave her the finger.
No, I mean, I would have been that. I'm like, here you go, girl. It's fine. Like, you can have your dress back. I don't have to be in your wedding. I'll be in his next one. That's what I would have said to her. Like, it's cool. I know it's my brother or whatever, but it's cool. Like, there's gonna
I'm always be here. You won't be there
long. This shit's not gonna work. Anyway, some family members intervened, and the wedding ended up going along as planned. Janie was in it and everything. They took some pictures and pretended to kind of like each other, I guess. But after that incident, Dolores kept asking Tom, like right up to the point that he went to the altar, are you sure you want to do this?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
So after they're married, Tom chose not to go to medical school. He instead decided to go to dental school. And he was accepted into the dental program at the University of Kentucky in Lexington.
Okay.
Susie and Tom moved into an apartment that Dolores had found for them. Susie found a job at a research company. Susie really liked Lexington, but she didn't like Dolores popping in all the time because the apartment they had was like the same area as Janie's apartment because she was also in school again. Mm-hmm. And Dolores would come see Janie all the time, and then she would drop in and see Susie and Tom, and Susie hated that shit.
Yeah.
Because she hated her.
This is like a perfect example of monster-in-law.
Monster-in-law, but I mean, they're both kind of monstrous.
Yeah, they're both kind of
monstrous. You got to feel bad for the men. You got to feel bad for Tom.
I do.
But anyway, after Tom graduates dental school, he decides to join the Navy until he figures out like where he wants to practice or what he wants to do.
Right.
He joins the reserves, but he does 2 years active dirty.
Active dirty.
Dirty.
Active
he
dirty.
does 2 years active duty as a commissioned officer. In early of 1974, Susie learns that she is pregnant.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So now he's really
now
stuck
we're going to have another
bitch.
Little Susie.
Now he's really stuck with her. Anyway, so they moved to the U.S. Marine Training Center in Parris Island, South Carolina. And Susie loves it there because, you know, it's like that southern coastal living that all Southerners dream about, you know, living on the beach. And it's all great until a hurricane comes and
or
blows your house down. But anyway, she liked it there. And not long after, John Wesley Newsom was born on August 30th, 1974 at the base hospital.
Oh.
Their first child. And followed shortly on March 26, 1976, their second son, James Thomas Newsom, was born. But Dolores would not see Jim, they called him Jim, for 2 years. And that's because when she went to see John, Susie made her get a hotel room and was just not very receptive to her. Like, when she visited, she could tell Susie didn't want her there. And she pretty much spent, 2 hours outside with Tom and the baby.
Okay.
And then went back home.
Well.
So the second child she didn't even go out to see because she kind of knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So then Tom was discharged from the Navy. 2 of his former classmates in dental college from Albuquerque, New Mexico, invited him to join their dental practice.
Okay.
Yeah. So the family moves to New Mexico. They buy a house. Susie absolutely hates it there. Tom loves it because he's like kind of an outdoors guy. And
why does she hate it so bad?
Well, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Yeah. He loved it out there. He decided that was the place for him. He loved the culture. He loved all the outdoor stuff he could do out there.
Right.
But Susie absolutely hated it. She hated the culture. She complained to whoever would listen about their lack of museums and their shitty opera. Anything she could. But what she hated most about it was nobody knew who she was.
That's probably the main reason why.
Yeah, because she was used to being able to throw her name around and people would be
from this family.
Yeah. She's used to being people being impressed by her name, and out here they really didn't care.
They were just that's nice.
They didn't know who she was, but she was more than happy to educate them about her family and about her famous aunt and all that, but they really didn't give a shit. They're like, okay, so you're Susie Newsom, I'm the King of France.
Yeah.
Who gives a shit? Yeah.
The Queen of Wales.
So she made a few friends, like her neighbors or whatever, but really she didn't have anybody because nobody really liked her out there. And anytime that she would make a friend, all she would do was complain about not only New Mexico, but she would complain about Tom's mother, Dolores.
God.
And how much she hated her. Nevertheless, Tom said that...
I see why this story is called Bitter Blood.
Yeah. So Tom said that for a while, Susie was a pretty good mom, and she seemed to take good care of the boys. But then as she really becomes unhappy in New Mexico and she starts becoming even more unhappier in their marriage, people start to notice bruises on the boys.
Oh, no.
Yeah. One day, Tom came home to find John holding his arm, and John said he fell while jumping on a bed at a babysitter's house. Well, the babysitter completely denied that the kids jumped on the bed at all.
Okay, yeah.
And so Tom took him to the doctor, and sure enough, the arm was broken. And then another time, I think this was a short time after that, the babysitter noticed a large bump on the back of Jim's head. And she called Susie because Susie was working. She called Susie at her office and told Susie about it. And Susie just said that the kids were jumping on the bed again. And she said, well, just bring them to my office and I'll take care of it. Well, the babysitter brings the boys to her office. And instead of Susie taking them to a hospital or a doctor, she just takes them to another babysitter and asks somebody to keep them for the remaining hours that she has to work.
What?
So when she gets home with the kids, Tom is concerned about the injury because at this point, Jim's eyes starting to turn black.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so he takes Jim to the hospital. Jim has suffered. See, I can't talk. For a podcaster, I cannot talk.
Sometimes words are hard.
Yeah, Jim suffered a mild concussion. And the doctors were suspecting child abuse.
Oh, wow.
Because they didn't really see that as coming from an accident. They said it looked like he had been punched. And they referred this to social services. Well, Susie insisted that the injury was an accident. And Tom believed her because he had never seen this kind of behavior from Susie. He'd never seen her hit the boys or even spank them. So he really didn't believe that she could have done this.
Right.
So he defended her. And he later said that he would regret that, but he could not bring himself to believe that his wife would do that to his child.
Yeah, I guess you can kind of see it from his point. You don't want to believe, like, that somebody would be capable of doing that.
Yeah,
especially the woman you love.
Yeah. During all this, Dolores and Janie visit in New Mexico, which I'm sure Susie absolutely hates. But they had never been out there before. And Susie and Tom had been living there for a few years. So they come out to see the grandkids or whatever. And, of course, Susie books them a room at a hotel.
Yeah. You ain't staying here, bitch.
Which they were offended by.
Oh,
but Dolores notices that Tom and Susie are having problems. And she also knows about this child abuse investigation going on. So she suggests that Susie and the boys visit her in Kentucky until things calm down between everybody. And Tom didn't think this was going to happen, but he was surprised when Susie actually accepted. So Susie and the boys go to Kentucky for a few days and visit with Dolores and Chuck.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like Dolores and Susie were actually getting along, but Dolores said that Susie was acting really strange and that she would not let the boys out of her sight. Like, she became...
Like, obsessive?
Yeah, she became, like, very
super
overprotective of the boys. So, she goes back to New Mexico, but not for long. Her and Tom are just having so many problems, and she hates it there. So... when her grandfather gets sick in North Carolina, she takes the boys and decides not to return. So Susie moves back to North Carolina with her family in Greensboro, and she tells them that Tom told her to leave and that he didn't want to be married anymore.
Okay.
Tom, of course, denied that, but he said that he knew it was coming, and that he was going to miss the boys, but he knew that there was, like, no saving the marriage. Susie gets an attorney and has him draw up a separation agreement. She asked for full custody of the kids, Tom to pay $200 per kid every month in child support, $100 a month in alimony, full expenses for Susie to go to graduate school, half the equity of the house.
And, of course, $200 back then was a lot.
Yeah, this is like this is late 70s by this point. She wanted, so anyway, half the equity of the house and $1,500 for furniture that she had left in in New Mexico, and half the interest on the 40 acres of land that Tom had purchased.
Okay.
And she relinquished any rights to his dental practice.
She didn't want much.
No, she didn't want too much. She did not immediately send the agreement to Tom because she was kind of hoping that they would get back together. But she wanted it to be, like, on her terms. So she was thinking by leaving him with the boys that he would kind of wake up and realize how much he wanted her back.
But he kind of realized, hey, I kind of like this.
Yeah, he kind of realized he kind of liked it. Yeah, and she was hoping that he would ask for them to reconcile and that she could convince him to move back to North Carolina. Well, that didn't happen because while they were separated, Tom started seeing somebody else. He started dating one of his dental assistants, and this was a lady named Kathy.
So, did Susie not like Kathy?
I don't know if Susie liked many people.
Yeah.
No, I don't think,
Susie only likes Susie.
I don't think she really had anything too personally against Kathy, but of course, this did not make her happy. And she thought that Tom had been having an affair
with her
before they separated, which could have been. He denied that. He said he didn't start seeing Kathy until after they separated, but... Right. Who knows? So shortly after this, when she realizes that Tom is not going to take her back or doesn't want her back, she sends him the agreement, and he asks for a few things to be tweaked in it, but he pretty much signs it. He agrees to it.
Right.
And then shortly thereafter, Susie decides she wants to move to Taiwan with the boys. Yeah.
Taiwan?
Yeah.
Okay.
She was really into Chinese culture, and she'd been studying it for a little while, and she wanted to learn Mandarin.
Okay.
So, yeah, she decides she's going to pack the boys up and ship them and go off to Taiwan.
I think that's one of the hardest languages in the world, too, man.
Yeah. But she tells Tom this, and Tom pleads with her not to take the boys to Taiwan.
Yeah, don't blame him.
He asks her to either let him have them in New Mexico or leave them with her parents until she got back.
Okay.
But Susie doesn't listen, and she packs the boys up and takes them to Taiwan.
All right.
Well, she gets there, But then life gets really hard for her because she's a single mother in a foreign country. She doesn't know the language, and she has to share a 3-bedroom apartment with her landlady. Like, she gets 2 rooms of this apartment, but her landlady is also there, and her landlady frequently entertains guests.
Okay.
And Susie's got to deal with that. And besides that, she had the kids in a daycare, but she really didn't have anybody that she could call on for help.
Right.
Plus, she liked a lot of attention, but being the only, like, white American in a city, that's going to draw a lot of attention that she didn't like. Anyway, also the boys were getting sick frequently there. They were getting pneumonia repeatedly. So she only ends up staying there about 6 months and decides to go back home.
Okay.
And, of course, during this time, Tom did not see the boys at all. He was sending Susie money, what he agreed to send her, but with what he was paying her, and plus at this point he's starting his own practice, and he's just starting that practice, so he doesn't have the money to fly internationally.
Right.
When Susie gets back, she moves back in with her family, and she starts dating a man named Guy Martin. Martin was a friend of Tom and Susie's in college, and I guess he'd always carried like a torch for her. And so much so that when she was in New Mexico, he would keep in touch with her family, and he would visit them at Christmas. And so her family was really excited about this because they really liked him.
Okay.
And she seemed like she was really into Guy, too. And eventually she starts talking about marriage.
Okay.
Yeah, the first one's not even over, really, because they haven't even actually filed for divorce. But she's looking forward to marrying this guy. Well, she's actually talking about wedding plans to her friends, and then the relationship just ends abruptly.
Why?
Well, neither one of them would really talk about why, but Guy did later say that Susie was just too obsessed with Tom and his mother, Dolores. And she was just so focused on her hatred for them that it pretty much just dominated her life.
So that's probably why she jumped to the marriage thing, just so she could see if it would make Tom jealous.
That's possible.
Or piss Dolores off. Like,
I never thought about that, but that's very possible. But I think this guy.
Yeah, well, this guy.
I think he just realized I need to.
He was like, I gotta get the fuck away from here before I get into something I can't get out of.
I think he saw how hateful she was and how she could be when she didn't like when she didn't like someone. So he's probably thinking, like, what if she doesn't like my mom?
Guy, you made the right decision.
Yeah, I think he made the right choice there.
Dodged a bullet.
But anyway, so Susie and her mother, again, are not really getting along. They never really did. And Susie's parents are trying to get her to, like, take responsibility for the failure of her marriage.
Mm-hmm.
While Susie keeps going off about Tom and his mother, they're like, hey, like, maybe you need to think about what you could have done differently, at least so you'll know better for next time. I mean, they seem like pretty good parents. They weren't just like... they were trying to support her.
But they were also like, you got to call yourself out on your own shit.
Yeah, they were trying to call her out on her shit. Susie starts looking sick. She's getting very thin, and she just does not look to be in good health. And she starts seeing a psychiatrist, and she starts taking the boys to a psychiatrist for treatment. And the psychiatrist pretty much said that, yeah, she just talked about how much she hated Tom and Dolores. The custody battle, Susie keeps delaying things, and she asked for a settlement, and every time her and Tom reach a settlement, the lawyers reach a settlement, she reneges on it and she starts trying to get more and more money. So at one point, they had reached a settlement, and Tom was going to give her $15,000. And that was going to cover her equity of the house and the furniture she left and other expenses. They had even gotten so far into this agreement, Tom had signed, and he had borrowed the money from his mother, Dolores, to just send her a check. So he sends a check to her attorney's office, and the attorney returns it and says that Susie needed more money for, I think it was her expenses, dental school expenses, because while he was in dental school, she worked, and I guess she kind of supported him, so she was trying to get that money back.
Okay.
Yeah. Tom is getting pissed off, so Tom files for divorce in New Mexico. And Susie hates this because she wants it heard in North Carolina. Well, Tom's just thinking, let me play hardball with her for a while and maybe she'll back off.
Yeah.
When he files for divorce, he tries to get full custody of the boys. Even though that wasn't really even what he wanted. But
he wanted to show her, like, okay, I'm game.
Yeah. And so, anyway, this freaks Susie out. She's so afraid that if this case gets heard in New Mexico, that he's going to end up getting her kids. But she ends up getting her way. The divorce is held in North Carolina. The custody is eventually decided, and Tom is to get the kids every other Christmas, every other spring break, 30 days in the summer, and can see them in North Carolina anytime he wants, as long as he gives a 2 weeks notice. He also has to pay all of the travel expenses for his kids to fly to New Mexico. And the judge says that the kids were not allowed to fly by themselves, or not they were allowed to fly. They were not allowed to switch planes by themselves.
Okay, layover.
Yeah. So there were no direct flights from
North Carolina?
Yeah, to Albuquerque.
Okay.
So Susie would have to fly with the kids to Georgia, to Atlanta, and then put them on a plane to New Mexico, and then he would have to pick them up there. Well, Tom was ordered to pay all of her expenses from North Carolina to Atlanta and back.
Okay.
And he wasn't happy about this, but
he is kind of getting screwed.
Yeah, he really is. And later he found out that she would actually drive the kids to Atlanta and pocket
so she was pocketing the money.
Yeah.
Okay.
But when this was all settled out, he felt like he had been, quote, hometowned. Hometowned, yeah. He said because of who Susie's aunt was.
Okay. He felt like they put more into her favor.
Yeah, that
because of who she was.
It totally went her way.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's just dealing with it, and Dolores is pissed because Dolores is actually paying for a lot of his legal expenses. And she wanted him to have more time with the boys and pay Susie less money. But anyway, after that's all said and done, Tom marries Kathy. With Susie's health problems, and I have a theory on this, I think she was just so obsessed and so enraged with Tom and his mom. I just think it started eating away at her.
Yeah, she probably got to the point where she wouldn't eat, and she was just constantly over-obsessing.
Yeah.
So that could cause her to malnourish herself.
Exactly. I mean, when you live like that, I mean, at some point you have to, accept the apology that you're not going to get and just move on for your own sanity, But she was not doing that. I think it was eating away at her. That's my theory. But anyways, so Susie, at the advice of her mother, she starts seeing Dr. Klenner. This is her uncle who had delivered her at birth.
Okay.
Well, Dr. Klenner at this point was kind of controversial because he was practicing this form of alternative medicine. He believed that large quantities of vitamins injected into your veins, intravenously injected, would cure just about anything.
Okay.
Yeah. So he diagnosed Susie with muscular sclerosis.
Okay.
Or, I'm sorry, not muscular, multiple sclerosis.
Okay.
And decides to give her vitamins as a treatment. So she's getting IV, vitamin C, and vitamin B12.
Now, these are just natural vitamins.
Yeah, I mean, they're vitamins.
Yeah.
But, I mean, your body can only handle so many vitamins, and it can only do so much with vitamins.
You can, overdo the vitamins, too.
Yeah. So, that's what he prescribes her. But while she is seeing Dr. Klenner, and she's going to this clinic to get these vitamin injections, she reunites with her first cousin, Fritz Klenner.
Fritz Klenner.
Yeah, his name was Fred Klenner Jr., but everybody called him Fritz.
Okay.
Fritz was a whack job. He was a nut. So let me give you a little backstory on Fritz here. Fritz, being raised by his father, who was a Nazi sympathizer and a weapons enthusiast, Fritz always had guns. He grew up with guns. The Klenner household was known to be very cluttered, and they had a ton of Nazi memorabilia and firearms in the home. And since he was a little kid, his father started buying him toy guns, and then it went to real guns. And he didn't have many friends growing up.
Because he was a weirdo?
Yeah, probably because he was a weirdo. And I don't think Dr. Klenner really let him do much. When he got older, Dr. Klenner, being a white supremacist, when Fritz was in high school, when the schools in the South started to integrate, when they integrated Fritz's high school, Dr. Klenner sent him to Georgia to a private school.
Just so he wouldn't have
he wouldn't have to go to school with black people.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah. So after he graduated from high school, he went to the University of Mississippi, which is called Ole Miss.
Ole Miss.
That's what they call it. And one of the reasons that Dr. Klenner sent him there was because they were like one of the last schools to integrate, which, I mean, the government made them, but they kind of fought against it. So he's like, yeah, this is the school for him.
Yeah.
So he goes to school there, and at first he does really well, but then his grades start to slip, and he's close to graduation, but he was like 3 credit hours short of graduating, and it was because he didn't complete a foreign language. Course. Mm-hmm. But he goes back home and he tells his father that he graduated.
Okay.
And that they were supposed to like mail him his degree. And when that doesn't happen, Dr. Klenner calls the school raising hell, and they tell him that Fritz didn't graduate. And this was like in December when Fritz returned home, and they're like, we don't even hold graduation mid-year like that. And so when Dr. Klenner goes back to Fritz tells him that he was going to finish the course via correspondence, but that the people in the language department hated him. So they were pretty much screwing him over.
Probably because he was a racist.
And Dr. Klenner believed him. The odd thing about it was he was taking German. And Dr. Klenner was actually, I think his parents were German immigrants, or maybe his grandparents, but they were German, and he knew how to speak German, and they spoke German in the home. So you would think that would be an easy class for him.
Right.
But no, he never got that credit. He never actually graduated. He told his father that he did, and he told his father that he had been accepted into Duke University Medical School.
That's a stretch.
Yeah. Dr. Klenner is excited about this because he wanted Fritz to be just like him. He goes to medical school, or he thinks he's going to medical school. Dr. Klenner is paying for him to go to medical school. He's paying for his living expenses. Fritz, he just pretty much goes there, and he has an apartment, and he really just doesn't do anything. Yeah. But he tells everybody that he's in med school. He tells everybody that he's studying to be a doctor. And it was even said in the book that he was hanging out at this garage with like these mechanic guys, and he had become friends with them, and he would just spend all day long shooting the shit with them. But he would tell them that he was a medical student. Mm-hmm. And they said they didn't understand how somebody could be a med student because they're really busy.
And he's there all the time.
Yeah. But when they would close up the shop, and they would kind of hint to Fritz, like, okay, we're going to go home now, Fritz would be like, oh, I need to go to the hospital and make rounds.
Okay.
So he carried on this charade for like a long time, and finally, like, the family found out that he was not in medical school at all. Dr. Klenner probably didn't really know what to do with him, so he hired him to work at his clinic as like a technician, like an aide. So Fritz starts to work for Dr. Klenner, and he's really good with the patients, and he does know a lot about medicine just because of what Dr. Klenner's taught him. Mm-hmm. They said he was an excellent phlebotomist. Like, he could find veins very easily, and that they were pretty much his blood draws were painless. So he's working at this clinic, and at one point he marries, and then he just becomes this habitual liar, and he starts telling people that he's affiliated with the FBI and the CIA. Oh, God. And that they're asking him to do these undercover missions. And he also becomes obsessed with the apocalypse and is constantly talking about the end of the world. He's a doomsday prepper.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Which, I mean, you can't knock those people too much. I mean, if the end of the world comes, they're the only ones.
But when they start obsessing over that, it becomes like, because they really believe.
When it comes to the apocalypse, I just want to go out like the first wave of whatever happens.
Just take me out. I don't want to
I'm not trying to be left here with Cher and the cockroaches. Just let me go.
And all the styrofoam
trying
everywhere.
To survive. Yeah. Anyway, And he's kind of victimizing people because he would make friends with a couple and then steal the man's wife. And he did this a couple times while he was still married to his wife, but they were separated. So eventually all these people kind of find out about each other and they get together and they're like all pissed at like what Fritz has done to their lives, but they're trying to be decent humans. So they think, okay, Fritz has to have some psychological problems. Mm-hmm. That's the reason he does this. And at this point, him and his wife, Ruth, are getting divorced. So Ruth and these other victims of his, one day they decide to call Dr. Klenner to try to get him to intervene and get Fritz some help. So they call the Klenner house, and Dr. Klenner answers, and they tell him about everything Fritz has done and said. And Dr. Klenner says, I don't think this is any of your business. And then Fritz comes and snatches the phone from his dad and is telling them to get the fuck out of his life.
Oh, wow.
And that's pretty much the end of that.
They actually did that mildly, because if that were me and I was his friend, I'd be over there beating his ass.
Right. I mean, they were just trying to be decent people. I mean, they thought something was really wrong with him. But anyway, so him and Susie quickly start to become friends. Now, of course, they had not been close as children because the family stayed away from that, the weird side of the family. Yeah.
They're first cousins.
Yeah, they're first cousins. Okay. They developed this friendship, and the family thought that it was probably just supporting each other because they were both going through divorces. They've been through similar things. But Fritz starts frequenting the Newsome house a lot, and he starts coming late at night. Mm-hmm. And so people are starting to suspect that they've got a little more going on than just being friends.
Ew.
Yes, and this was driving Susie's mother batshit. She was not having any of it. And so her and Susie were constantly fighting about, because, her mother was concerned about how it would look to other people. Mm-hmm. Well, one day, everything goes down. Susie is sitting at dinner with her parents in their house, and Susie brings up that somebody she knows bought a Chow, the dog.
Mm-hmm. Chow Chow.
Chow Chows, yeah. And her dad makes some sort of comment like, what kind of idiot buys a Chow? And Susie stands up. She's like, I don't have to take this shit.
I bought a Chow. And I'm not an idiot.
She's like, I don't have to take this shit. So she gets in an argument with her parents. Family members later said that they thought that she had hit her mom, Florence. And somewhere during this whole argument, Florence is like, what's up with you and Fritz? Like, are you banging your cousin or not?
Damn, Flo.
And this pisses Susie off. And Susie just takes the boys and moves out and vows to never speak to her parents again.
All right.
Yeah.
Dang, girl. Over there messing with your cousin.
Right. So Susie moves out. She gets an apartment in Greensboro, and she's living alone with the kids. And shortly thereafter, Fritz moves in with her.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fun.
So after this, when Fritz moves in, they put up these thick blankets all over all the windows.
So nobody can see in?
Right.
Okay.
And probably nobody can see out.
Yeah.
And they're pretty much just stay bunkered down in this apartment all the time, even though Susie is in graduate school at this point. They wouldn't let the boys play outside.
Was it because, were they just really paranoid, or was he just paranoid?
Yeah, one or both.
Yeah.
They were getting paranoid.
I'm sure that, he rubbed off on her.
Yeah. And Susie's pretty much cut off all of the family. So Susie and Fritz start telling other people that don't really know them that they are married.
Yeah.
And soon the boys start calling Fritz Pa. Yeah. And probably to spite her parents, they do purchase 2 Chow Chows. And they name them Chowie and Maisie.
Okay.
Yeah. And the only time the boys are ever seen outside is when they are actually walking the dogs.
All right. This is weird.
Yeah, it is weird. So in July of 1984, Tom gets his kids for his summer visit, his 30 days that he's supposed to get his kids. Mm-hmm. They fly out to New Mexico, and when they arrive out there, Tom notices that the kids are completely different. And he said that they had these dark circles under their eyes, their clothes were ill-fitting, and they just didn't look to be very healthy. And they came bringing sacks full of vitamins that they were told to take every day. And they said if they didn't, that their mom would get mad. Well, Tom's like, well, your mom's not going to know if you don't take them. So he throws these vitamins away.
Okay.
So over that month, he works on bonding with his kids and trying to get them to kind of open up because they're kind of in this shell and they don't really want to talk.
So he could kind of like tell they were unhappy.
He could tell something was up. Yeah. And he really didn't know too much about the relationship between Susie and Fritz. I think he knew that they were friends. Well, nobody actually knows if that was really true, but it kind of looks that way. But the boys would slip up and call Fritz Pa in front of their dad, which is so disrespectful to him.
Yeah.
But
because they have a dad.
Yeah. But when they would question him about it, they just kind of would stop talking.
Yeah.
Towards the end of this visit, Tom is at his office one day, and he is supposed to leave and go meet Kathy and the boys at a local theater because they're going to go see a movie. Mm-hmm. Well, he gets a phone call that his mother, Dolores, and his sister, Janie, had been murdered in Louisville. What? Yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
I was like, yeah, I already know where this is going.
We already know. All right. So, yeah. So Dolores had stuck to a strict routine. Mm-hmm. And when she didn't show up at church one morning, one of her church friends went looking for her and went to her house. There she found Dolores gunned down by the garage, shot in the head, and she had been out there so long that maggots had started to infest her wounds.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So she had been out there a minute.
A little while.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't really the time she'd been out there. It was because it was summer and it was hot.
And it was hot,
and all
yeah.
That. And so they go in the house and they find Janie also gunned down. She had been shot 3 times in the torso, and it looked like she was trying to run from her attacker.
Oh, wow.
And she had curlers in her hair at the time. And so the kill shot was to her head, and one of the curlers was embedded in her skull.
Oh.
Yeah.
What about Chuck?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me mention Chuck. Chuck had died a few months prior.
Okay, so
from like a heart attack. So it was just Dolores, and Janie was home for the weekend.
Okay.
She was also in dental school at the time, but she was home with her mom on the weekend when this happened. Mm. So when the police investigate this, and this investigation was led by a detective named Dan Davidson, and this detective becomes obsessed with this case.
Yeah.
And they said that it looked like a professional hit. There were no shell casings, no fingerprints. It was just very clean. It looked like a pro had done it.
Like somebody hired somebody to do it?
Somebody hired a hitman or something like that. Robbery was obviously not a motive. Not that much was taken from the house. So they suspected it was a professional job. Well, at first they suspected Tom. And when they talked to Tom, they really didn't get the vibe that he was guilty of this. But they felt like they needed to rule him out because he was really the only one that stood to benefit from murdering them.
Yeah.
Because with Janie gone, Tom was going to inherit all of his parents' fortune. Mm-hmm. And they had a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, and they felt like maybe that was the motive. So they asked Tom to take a polygraph test, which Tom agreed, and Tom took it and passed. Mm-hmm. So they were able to rule him out, but Tom really couldn't help them. He had no idea who would want to do this to his parents or to his mom and his sister. So Tom goes back to Kentucky for the funeral, and he calls Susie and begs her to let the boys stay with him just a little while longer. Because of all this, he had to go back to Kentucky. He didn't get all this time with the boys. And he had lost his whole family. And he just wanted to spend some more time with his kids.
Yeah.
Well, Susie coldly tells him no, that she has plans to take them camping.
Bitch.
Because she had gotten to be a pretty outdoorsy kind of girl.
She hated it in Albuquerque.
Yeah, she couldn't stand that stuff before she met Fritz. And Tom was kind of an outdoors guy. And he said at one point he was trying to get Susie to go camping.
But she would never go.
But Susie said only if there's a holiday in there. But now she's all about the outdoor life. She's all about hunting and camping and shooting guns.
Because of Fritz.
So anyway, Tom is forced to send the kids back to North Carolina, where they go back to living with Fritz. Well, after the death of his mother and sister, Susie's parents, Bob and Florence Newsome, they send a flower arrangement and a sympathy card to the funeral. Mm-hmm. And Tom calls them to thank them. And this opens up a line of communication. And Tom writes them and tells them the concerns that he has about the boys and that he really wished that he had more time with them. Her parents responded that they agreed that they never liked the custody arrangement and they felt like the boys needed more time with their father.
Yeah.
They said that Susie had pretty much cut them off and they really didn't know much about what was going on, that they were worried about her, they were worried about the boys. There wasn't really much that they could do because she just wasn't talking to them. So they did advise Tom to come to North Carolina and see the boys for a while, which he did. He gave the 2 weeks notice to Susie. And him and Kathy, he took off work and him and Kathy flew to North Carolina. They rented an apartment for I think it was 2 weeks that they kept the boys. Mm-hmm. They rented an apartment. Although Tom didn't know at the time, the apartment was right across the street from Susie's apartment complex. He didn't know he was that close to her. Susie was not happy about this, but there wasn't much she could do about it. But they said that she just kind of chucked their luggage at him. And so the boys spent time with them for a little bit. And Tom noticed one day while he went outside and he saw Fritz out there early in the morning walking the dogs. And that's when he realized Fritz was living with Susie.
Okay.
Yeah. So after they go back to New Mexico.
Now, hold on. Now, Tom knew that was her cousin, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. After they go back to New Mexico, Tom decides that he wants to try to get custody or he wants more time with the kids.
Okay.
And he's planning on taking Susie back to court, especially since now that his mother has left him this inheritance, he has a lot of money, so he can afford to do it.
Right.
He proceeds with that, and he's corresponding with the Newsome family and also some of her aunts and people in the Sharp family. They're corresponding with all of them. And eventually he asks Bob Newsome if he will testify for him in court. And Bob agrees.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they set up a custody hearing. But this custody hearing never really happens because on the night of May 18th, 1985, bad shit goes down.
What kind of bad shit?
Okay. Susie's brother, Rob, had been living in Texas with his family, but he had gotten fired from his job. So he and his wife, Alice, and their kids had moved back home, and they were living with the Newsomes.
Okay.
In Greensboro. Well, Bob Newsome's mother, his elderly mother, Hattie Newsome, was still living alone after the death of her husband in Winston-Salem. And she had taken a couple of falls and was injured. And so Bob and Florence decided that she didn't need to live alone anymore. So they were planning on moving in with Hattie and taking care of her and leaving their house to Rob. The house in Winston-Salem, Hattie's house, and they called her Nana. Ever since she had grandkids, they started calling her Nana. Mm-hmm. They were getting the home remodeled before they moved in. And while they were waiting on the remodeling to be done, they had several family friends and Hattie's daughter come and check on her throughout the week. Mm-hmm. And then on weekends, Bob and Florence would spend the weekend with her.
Okay.
But they would always come back to their house on Sunday night. It's late on Sunday night, and Rob starts to get a little worried because his parents aren't back yet. And, of course, he tries to call Nana's house, and he's getting no answer, so he's getting really concerned. And after a while, he calls one of the family friends, and Nana's physician, whose name was Dr. Sutton, who had lived in the area. Yeah. He was one of the people that was going by and checking on Nana. He called him to go over there and see if there was anything going on. Dr. Sutton and his wife, they go to the house. They knock on the door, and of course, nobody answers. So they start looking in the windows, and they see Nana laying on the couch, and they see Florence, balled up on the floor, and there's, blood everywhere.
Oh,
so they freak out, and they go to a neighbor's house, and they call the police, and then them and the neighbors go back over there, and they're looking around even more because they don't see Bob, and they're wondering, did Bob do this, or what's up with this? But they knew that they couldn't help Nana and Florence. So
they were already gone.
They were just waiting for the police to arrive because they didn't know if like the assailant was still in the house.
Right.
So when the police get there, they find Bob, who looked like he was trying to run. He was also shot execution style. So Bob was shot. Nana had been shot, and she looked like she had praying hands. And the police thought that maybe she was praying during this, but then they kind of determined that she was posed like that. But Florence was shot, but also stabbed repeatedly.
So she was the only one that was stabbed?
She was the only one that was stabbed.
Everybody else was shot execution
Everyone else was shot execution style.
Hmm.
And so while police are investigating this, they talk to Rob, and they're trying to get any information out of Rob that they can. And of course, Rob is very upset about it. But Rob tells them that his sister Susie's in-laws were killed the same way a year before.
So he's connecting the dots already?
Yeah. Well, see, Susie had, ever since the Lynch murders, Susie had told anybody that would listen that it was because of Tom that they were killed. She said that Tom had a gambling problem and that he had accrued such a large gambling debt that he owed money to the mafia. Mm-hmm. And that the mafia killed the Lynches so that Tom could inherit the money and pay them back. So after the Newsomes were killed, Susie went around telling everyone that it was because of Tom's connections to the underworld that they were killed.
Now, was there ever any evidence that he had a gambling problem or anything?
No, he's just in New Mexico doing root canals and shit.
Yeah, like he's just trying to live a normal life.
This is what she's telling everybody. She's coming up with these crazy stories that he's involved with the mob and the mafia and that they're killing all these people. Mm-hmm. So the family automatically suspects that Fritz and Susie had something to do with this.
Yeah, at this point, I would say so.
Yeah. And so Susie is acting like really strangely at the funerals, and she would bring up money at inappropriate times, and she was asking about like her grandmother's furs and her mother's dresses and trying to get all their stuff.
And this is like at their funeral, like, or right after?
Yeah. This is like
dead?
Right after. And of course, nobody trusted Fritz because at this time, Fritz is just stockpiling weapons.
And he's a Looney Tune.
Yeah, he's a Looney Tune. And he's still trying to portray himself as a doctor.
Yeah.
Because Dr. Fred Klenner actually passed away before this.
Yeah.
And Fritz was trying to take over his clinic. Yeah. Until the State Bureau of Investigation started investigating him for practicing medicine without a license.
Yeah, and that's
so then
good.
He quit, but he was still wearing his white lab coat everywhere. He was still calling himself a doctor. And here, get this, he would go to Kroger and buy medical supplies. He would go late at night. He would wear his lab coat, and the workers there said they saw him frequently. That he was a little odd, but he was nice. But they didn't understand why he was going to Kroger to buy medical supplies.
Yeah, because usually a medical provider has,
access
somewhere else
to like a company.
Yeah.
Anyway, the family just grew more and more suspicious of Susie and Fritz, but nobody was like willing to confront her about this. And Rob and his wife Alice were terrified because they didn't know if somebody was coming after the whole family.
Right.
And so they were trying to protect their kids. The police, when they figure out that there's a connection between this murder in Winston-Salem and this other murder in Louisville, Kentucky, and the connection is Susie Newsome-Lynch, they call the detectives in Kentucky and fill them in on it. That case had pretty much gone cold. They didn't know who did that. The Kentucky detectives come down to North Carolina to assist in the investigation, and they start looking into Susie and Fritz.
Good.
Well, while they're doing surveillance on Fritz, they get a tip that a young man by the name of Ian Perkins may be involved in this. Fritz's mother, Annie Hill, when they questioned her and asked if she knew where Fritz was the night of the murders, Annie said that he had been camping with this kid, Ian.
Okay.
So they go to talk to Ian, and Ian pretty much just breaks down and tells them everything. Ian was a family friend. He was quite a bit younger than Fritz, but Fritz, he like grew up idolizing Fritz. Because Fritz was like always wearing camo and he was into guns and like the cool G.I. Joe shit.
Yeah.
And this kid, Ian, was all about like military type stuff. He had graduated from college and he had aspirations to actually work for like the FBI or the CIA.
Yeah.
Well, Fritz tells him he's in the CIA.
Oh my God.
And he has all these connections.
Why does everybody like that's kind of off? They always work for the CIA
or FBI. Yeah, so he claims that he has all these connections. And he tells Ian that he can get him in there, but he just needs his help with a covert operation first, so that the CIA knows that they can trust him. So Fritz explains that he has to do a, quote, touch, unquote, which means a killing.
Okay.
But he claims that they're these, like, drug dealers in Winston-Salem that he has to kill, and it's for the government. But he tells Ian that he won't actually have to kill anybody. He just needs his help, and if he goes through with this and he keeps his cool about it, that he's in there. He's in the CIA pretty much.
Oh my God. You're in the club, kid.
Yeah. So they do meet up in on Roanoke Mountain, Virginia, which is like not far across the line.
Yeah, Roanoke.
Yeah, well, they go to a campground, and like Fritz, I guess they have like an honor system where you fill out a card and you pay like money to stay on this campground. You put it in a little box. And he does this to try to create an alibi. And then they go back down to Winston-Salem, and all he does is have Ian drop him off at this house.
Okay.
And like pick him back up. When the police get a hold of Ian, this kid just breaks down. He did not understand what it was he was doing. He didn't know anything about the Newsomes. He didn't know who it was that Fritz had killed. He just tells them everything, and he doesn't set up any sort of deal for immunity. He just really felt guilty and wanted to do the right thing. So he helps the police, and he agrees to wear a wire and talk with Fritz. They wire him up, and they get him to meet Fritz. Fritz drives a black Blazer, a Chevy Blazer, and Fritz like picks him up somewhere, and Ian gets in the car, and Ian's telling Fritz how the police are questioning him, and they're asking him to take a polygraph. And Fritz is like, yeah, they don't have anything. They're just fishing. It's going to be okay. You'll be fine with the polygraph. I'm going to give you some Valium to keep you calm.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a sedative. So he gives some sedatives to Ian and tells him, take one. Well, this kid is not the sharpest tool in the shed. He knows this guy's a murderer.
And he's going to accept a pill from him. Oh, God.
And the cops that are listening in are like, oh
my God,
fuck.
No.
They're like, because they knew Fritz had access to cyanide.
Oh, my God.
So they're thinking, he's giving this kid cyanide and now he's going to die. So once they get Ian out of there, of course, they have him checked out. And Fritz really did just give him a sedative. Mm-hmm. But that first conversation, they really didn't get much. Like, Fritz didn't admit to anything.
Right.
So it takes 2 more times before they actually get enough on Fritz. And during this time, Fritz keeps trying to give this kid Ian pills. But they had to tell Ian, hey, like, don't take pills from Fritz anymore. So Ian would take the pills, but he was like, I'm going to take this later. But eventually, Fritz says just enough that they can arrest him. And their last conversation, Fritz tells Ian, look, I'm going to write a letter saying that you didn't have any direct involvement in this, that you thought you were working for the CIA. And he also stated that he felt like he was about to get royally screwed and that he would, quote, pop a capsule. I will not, meaning he would kill himself.
Oh, God.
So after he tells Ian that he's going to write this letter exonerating him and all that, he says, we will not speak again, and lets Ian out of the car. So nobody knew what that meant. But police feel like they have enough to get him. So they're going to... They didn't immediately arrest him. They want to try to get a warrant, and they're trying to get it for the next day, which is Monday, June 3rd, 1985. The next day, when they are trying to arrest Fritz, they're trying to be careful with him because they know that he has all this whole arsenal And they know he's crazy. Yeah. And they know he's a psychopath. And they know he's dangerous. So they have undercover cops looking at Susie's apartment. And they're trying to get Fritz out alone. So they call the apartment. They know he's there. They call the apartment. Susie answers. They ask for Fritz. And she tells them that he's not home. At this point, they're assuming, it's like middle of the day, and they're assuming that the boys are in school. Well, then while these undercover officers are watching the apartment, they see Fritz, Susie, the boys, and their dogs all get into this Blazer with big duffel bags. And
so they're about to run.
Oh, shit. So they call in uniformed police officers. They respond to the call, and a slow-speed chase ensues. Fritz is driving very slowly, very cautiously, but he will not stop. And at one point, Fritz rolls down the window, sticks his head out with an Uzi, and starts firing at the police.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, causing a couple of them to be shot.
Yeah.
Not killed. They had bulletproof vests, but they were injured. One of them sustained permanent injuries to the lungs.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so they continue to chase Fritz, who is driving slowly, and at another point, they get him boxed in, and they had to actually use a civilian vehicle. It was a woman that was, stopped at a stoplight, who had her child in the car. And again, Fritz starts firing this Uzi. And this woman is scared to death. She's, trying to protect her child. She's hunkered down.
Right.
Well, Fritz starts, ramming bumpers and gets out of there again. So the chase continues, and by this point, they have a couple of injured officers, but they continue to follow Fritz. Suddenly, Fritz just stops the car, and they didn't know what was going on, and then they hear two loud bangs, and then a fire ignites under the Blazer.
Oh, shit.
And within milliseconds, this Blazer shoots up off the ground to the height of the telephone wires.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, the Blazer blew up.
And everybody was in it.
Everybody was in it.
Oh, my God. The babies.
Yeah. So Fritz's body goes flying, and so does Susie's. And when they find Fritz is still alive.
That bastard.
Yeah, he's barely breathing, but
like a cockroach.
He's still alive. And Detective Dan Davidson from Kentucky goes up to him because he's trying to get a last minute confession out of Fritz. He's like, Fritz, can you hear me? But Fritz is struggling to breathe. He's gurgling, and he ends up drowning in his own blood.
Oh, okay. So he does end up passing. He does,
yeah. Well, when they find Susie, she is obliterated. She has lost both of her legs, and the spring from the seat is protruding from her vagina.
Oh!
Yeah, which indicated that she was sitting on the bomb.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
What the fuck? That made me want to lock my legs together.
Right. God.
Ooh. So I'm assuming she didn't make it?
No, of course not. No, she died. She was dead when they found her. And all of Fritz's ammunition, camping supplies, MREs,
So Fritz planned to kill all of them?
It looks like that was the plan. But get this, so shit's everywhere. They had packed so many vitamins and meds that there were pills scattered out everywhere. And the boys were still actually in the remains of the car.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, they were still in there. When they went to get the boys' bodies, they noticed something, and it really concerned them because the boys had been shot. And the police were afraid that they had done that while they were returning fire. When Fritz was shooting, they were afraid that they had shot the boys. Shortly after all this goes down, within 20 minutes, and it had been a hot, sunny day, a massive storm erupts. And the wind was blowing the trees over.
Yeah.
And there was lightning struck close enough to the scene that they could smell it. Massive thunder, and then golf ball-sized hail starts falling out of the sky. And everybody said it was if God was angry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all the officers, they had to take cover somewhere because of all this bad weather. But after that, when they were able to collect the bodies and the dogs, of course, had died, the police buried the dogs and everybody else was taken in for an autopsy. Well, when the boys were autopsied, they determined that either Fritz or Susie had to have shot them.
Because they found the bullet?
Well, they found just the entry,
of the wound,
it.
Yeah,
it had come from like the front and not from the back. It wasn't from the cops.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was kind of a relief to them.
Yeah, I'm sure they would have felt like shit.
Yeah. But here's the thing: when the medical examiner opened up the bodies, he could smell a familiar smell. It was like a bitter almond smell, and it indicated cyanide.
He gave them cyanide before they even got in the car.
Cyanide before they got in the car. And although when the boys were shot, they feel like they were alive. They think they were like unconscious because the cyanide had started to take effect.
That's fucking terrible.
Of course, somebody's got to tell poor Tom Lynch.
Dude, I feel so...
In New Mexico.
You weren't lying. Like, I feel so bad for him, dude.
Yeah. So... Before anybody can officially notify Tom, a reporter calls him at his office.
A reporter?
A reporter, yeah. And the reporter is asking Tom to describe his ex-wife, and Tom's like, why the hell do you need to know this? And she said, well, something's happened. And he's like, what the hell happened? She's like, well, I can't disclose that to you. So Tom just hangs up on her. And then Tom calls the police, and they don't know all about this yet, you know? And he calls the police, and all they could tell him was that they were planning on making an arrest that day. So he thought maybe that's what the reporter was talking about. They just arrested them or something. And then Tom gets word somehow that Susie and Fritz are dead. And Tom actually said, well, good. I mean, he was just... Yeah, Tom was just
He just wasn't heartbroken about it.
Yeah, he was like, good, I get my kids now. Because he thought the kids were in school.
Oh, my God. Dude.
And... He had said that just everything that had happened with Susie and her being so evil throughout the whole thing, like he just really didn't have any sympathy for her. And I mean, he was glad that she was dead. But then Kathy started making some phone calls. Yeah, his wife started making some phone calls. And she had heard that the boys had also died.
Oh, my God.
And they were like praying that it wasn't true. So Tom called the police and asked if his kids were dead. And they told him, we can't tell you anything. You have to be officially notified. So that's when he kind of knew
that it was real.
So, and Tom just left his office that day, told his receptionist he didn't know when he would be back. Yeah. He took one thing out of his office, and that was a picture of him, Kathy, and the boys over Christmas one year.
Yeah.
And took it home and just sat at the table and cried. They finally officially notified Tom. And Tom flew to North Carolina to bring the boys back to New Mexico. He refused to let them be buried there. So they had a memorial service in North Carolina, and none of Susie's family believed that she really had anything to do with it. They felt like she was just manipulated by Fritz and that Fritz had done all of this. They insisted that Susie would have never hurt her kids. Well, Tom's kind of getting pissed off about this. And Tom starts doing interviews in the media, and he's like, look, y'all know this bitch like I do. He very much thought that she was a willing participant in this.
I think she was too.
Yeah. So the family was kind of divided. A lot of people just could not accept that Susie had anything to do with it. But then some of them were like, well, Susie was a smart girl. She had to have known what was going on, what was going to happen.
Right.
Well, all their questions were answered when the full coroner report came back. Susie had gunpowder on her hands.
She shot them.
They think that she shot the children. And also, they were able to prove that she is the one that detonated the bomb.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So, apparently, they had like a suicide pact if they had gotten caught.
I don't even know what to say.
Yeah. Tom, of course, goes back to New Mexico and buries his kids. Ian Perkins was the only person that was charged in this. And the police didn't really want him charged because they knew how much he helped them. But the district attorney pretty much insisted on it.
So what did they give him?
So in 1985, Perkins went on trial for his involvement in the murders, and he was sentenced to 4 months in jail and 5 years of probation.
I mean, I don't really know how I feel about that. I mean, I get that he was helping somebody out and he had sympathy for what happened.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean,
look what it all cost.
Yeah, the point the judge made was like the law is the law.
Right.
Know? But also, although Ian didn't know that Fritz was going to kill the Newsomes, he knew he was going to kill someone.
Yeah.
And he was helping with that.
And he didn't tell anybody.
Everybody thought, believed that he honestly believed Fritz was working for the CIA.
Yeah.
So, he got a pretty light sentence. But later on, I saw an article back in 2005. He was trying to get that, expunged off his record.
Yeah.
Because, he never did anything wrong after that. And I'm not sure how that turned out for him. But anyway, so...
have you heard anything about Tom after all this?
Yeah, and I'll get to that in just a second. So I just wanted to say this. When they interviewed Rob Newsom, Susie's brother, about this, when all this was going down, Rob was actually going to buy a gun to kill Fritz himself.
Damn, he should have did it quicker.
Yeah, he had already decided, because he decided that he had killed his grandmother and his parents, and he was a danger to his sister and his nephews, and that he was going to take him out.
He should have went with that instinct quick.
Well, he was trying to. He just didn't have enough time.
God, man.
But, yeah, so poor Tom. I did read an article. They did an article and interviewed him. And let me just say, and this was a quote from Tom, because I watched, one thing I used for research was Southern Fried Homicide.
Okay.
Covered this, and he was on there, and he said, "They killed me that day, too. It's just taking longer for me to die."
That's terrible.
Yeah. Tom was bitterly angry. Of course, he was devastated, but he was angry at everybody in this.
I'm sure he went through tons of
He felt like the
emotional
police
trauma.
could have taken Fritz while he was alone. But he also felt like he had tried to do everything to get his kids, and everything was just stacked up against him the whole way. And it seemed like in 2015 he was still pretty angry about it. They did an interview with him for the 30th anniversary of the murders. And at that point, he was on his third marriage. I don't know what happened with him and Kathy. I don't know if they got divorced or if she passed away. I didn't get any information on that. But he was on his third marriage. And at the time, he had a 13-year-old daughter. So at least he got to be a dad again. But he didn't have the child until
it doesn't replace the kids.
17 years after that. So, he was an older guy, and he lamented that, all his friends and people that he knew that were his age, they all had adult children who were married and had careers, and they even had grandchildren, and that he was not going to have that.
Because he was way older by the time.
Yeah. So, that was in 2015, so I guess his daughter's probably 18 or 19 now.
Yeah, but he's old. He's much older now.
Yeah, and he's retired from dentistry.
That's a tragic story, but it was...
And I know it ran really long, but it was really in-depth.
We're not going to make it a two... We really didn't want to make it a two-parter.
We did not want to make it a two-parter, so we made you listen to us for 2 hours.
Yeah, no. Dude, and this is just... You see it all the time. People, baby mamas, baby daddies, they break up, and then the other one obsesses the other. I have witnessed that. I've seen that in the relationship that I am in now, and I'm telling you, I've seen it. Women and men both, they get very bitter.
Yes.
And it's very important. I get it, you're heartbroken, whatever, things aren't going your way. Move on. Move on with your life. Stop being obsessed with what somebody else is doing. When it's over, it's over. Raise your kids. Raise your kids and let that person live their life. Definitely, I think she obsessed way too much.
Oh, yeah.
And that what brought her...
she had gone into complete paranoia
Yeah.
involving those kids. And
it was almost like she was using them as a pawn.
Well, that too, but they said, after her parents were killed, she contacted her attorney and asked, because she had inherited her parents' estate, or part of it, at that point, and she asked what would happen to that money if she died, and the attorney said it would go to her boys, and she's like, well, what if something happened to them? And the attorney told her that it would go to Tom. I don't really know how that works, but it was going to go to Tom. She did not want that to happen, and then she felt like she was telling everybody that Tom was behind all these murders, and she was afraid that Tom was going to kill her and the boys to get her money. And she didn't want that to happen, so she arranged for her brother's children to get her estate if her and her kids died.
Yeah. So,
she had just gone into complete paranoia, and who knows what her state of mind was. I don't know if she maliciously intended for all this. I don't know. They don't know if she really knew all that Fritz was doing. They think Fritz kind of took this grudge of hers upon himself, and that he was going to do away with anybody that threatened to wrong her.
Well, he was a loose cannon anyways.
Yeah, he really was. So, but then there are those that say that she manipulated him.
I think they manipulated each other.
One thing I forgot to mention, when the Newsomes were murdered, there was a small fire set in their house. It didn't burn their house down.
Yeah.
But they found that Bob's briefcase was empty, and they think that Fritz, I guess, burnt the documents that Bob had for the custody hearing.
Because he was going to testify, right?
Yeah. All the letters and stuff that him and Tom exchanged.
Wow.
Yeah, but it is a very sad case, and
it's a heavy case.
So that was the Bitter Blood murder.
Well,
folks.
That's a downer for me. Now I'm like, damn, dude.
Yeah,
I always hated to hear kids, involved in a situation like that. Stop bringing the kids into adult situations.
Right.
For sure.
Okay, so I guess we need to wrap this up. All right. Well, hit us up on Facebook at
www.facebook.com/tcdownyonder.
Send us a Gmail at
tcdownyonder@gmail.com.
Check us out on Instagram at
tc_downyonder.
Or on Twitter at
@downcrime. Hey, and if anybody can tell me how to actually change that, let me know. On Twitter.
Remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts.
Please rate and subscribe if you like us.
All right. And you'll hear us next time.
Absolutely. And until then, y'all stop being bitter.
Yeah, don't be bitter.
Just raise your kids. Move on.
Don't shack up with your first cousin.
And that's definitely a no-no. Yeah, don't. First of all, don't shack up with your first cousin.
Don't practice medicine without a license.
Yeah, don't shack up with your first cousin. Yeah, no, red flags. Nope, that's all. Bye, y'all.